Hello everyone and welcome to SkillCapped. I'm Notorious Dub and today I'm going to be going over the biggest differences in pro play and normal player games and giving you 6 must-use strategies that pros are using in nearly every game that you should be working into your game as well. Before we get into that though, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on because we here at SkillCapped have a ton more comprehensive premium guides to help you elevate your game and take you to that next level. Okay, so first things first, this is the one thing I really want to talk about at the beginning because so often I see people in games just don't know how to play together late round. Now when the time starts ticking down and it's getting down to a 1v2 or 2v2 situation, your team should be playing together like their life depends on it, because honestly it does. A 1v2 situation should end in a 1v2. The worst possible thing that you can do is give the solo player 2 1v1s that they can manage to clutch out potentially and pick up a round that they had no business actually picking up. And we see FaZe Clan and Sentinels put on a clinic in the FaZe Valorant Invitational and show us exactly what player synergy looks like later on in the rounds. Now in this round in particular, both teams played together incredibly well, with FaZe locking down the B site together, and the point of this is to make sure that they give Sentinels no gap to work their way in to catch them off guard and force them into a clean 2v2 scenario. Sentinels managed to do the exact same thing but on the A site instead. Sinatra and Shazam, with considerably lower HP, clear around the A site from top to bottom and front to back. This way they can completely eliminate any threat on A site before they plant and move into their post-plant positions. And both teams take their time and reduce any opportunity that the enemy team could find an opening and get a pick to win them the round outright. And then moving into the plant scenario, we see the teams continue this playing together late in the round because FaZe rotates early as a duo when the round gets late enough, because the time on the clock, they can virtually guarantee that Sentinels have to play for the A position. This is all while playing together and clearing every angle one by one, ready to trade out for the other at any given time. Meanwhile, Shazam and Sinatra pick their post-plant scenarios based off of each other. Now Shazam playing at the far side of the site and Sinatra playing close, so they can watch each other's back. But more importantly, they help the other person whenever they get into a fight. Now this round was played nearly perfectly from both teams, but Sinatra makes a huge clutch shot through the floor with his recon dart to swing the round. And all in all, this type of play in solo queue is so difficult to play against from either side, and if you're implementing this type of play in your games, you can guarantee that you're going to be clutching more rounds and picking up those crucial rounds that actually swing the tide of the game in your own favor. So make sure whenever you get into those late round scenarios, find your teammate and stick to their side like glue, because 2v1s and 2v2s become so much more effective when you're actually playing as a team. Alright, so next up we have stacking sites, and this is one thing I think we all need to take a lesson from. So often I see teams go 0-4 on defense and just keep their positions, or they're just losing on defense in general and refuse to swap up where they're playing. Now you have to keep the enemies guessing, and that's exactly what FaZe does here. So far, FaZe has had trouble defending on the A site, and they know that Sentinels are going for a default and spreading out for most of the rounds at least. Now their catwalk and mid have also been getting smoked off nearly every round, so instead of sitting behind the smoke and being nearly useless for the beginning of the round, they instead decide to stack 3 people on A main, which is where they're having the most trouble. Now worst case scenario here, the other team tries something different and just storms mid or cat because they left it open early round. That would be pretty unlucky. But even if they do that, then they're left with a 5v5 retake, and honestly that's not a terrible position to be in. Most likely though, and exactly what happens, they manage to get the pick. And then they back out into a safer, more defensive position. And this is honestly the most important part of the entire round, because as a defender, getting a pick and making it a 4v5 is a huge advantage. Now the other team just doesn't have enough manpower to put out enough pressure to take a site, and this last minute desperation attempt to take a site just ruins the round for the entire team because they didn't have enough power or pressure to actually take a site earlier, and they had to resort to something like this. Now these stacks are incredibly beneficial because it's a mix-up for defenders to make the attackers nervous about their strat calling and to make them play safer throughout all of the rounds because you're not sure what the other team's going to be doing on defense. And not to mention, it's just a very low risk scenario because if you don't manage to get a pick in the first 20 seconds of the round, you can always just rotate back out to your original position. As a defender, the last thing you want to do is to become predictable. So you should be working in stacks and mixing up as often as possible to keep the enemies guessing and make their attacker side as difficult as possible, because without synergy, attacker side is difficult enough as is. Alright, so next up I want to talk about playing for retake. And this is one of the reasons that pro teams are so consistent whenever they play together. Now, let's just be honest here. Your defense isn't going to be enough to stop every team from taking a site from you. So whenever they get past that first line of defense or they manage to get a pick, just give them the site and hold as much area as you can, so when your team gets there to back you up, you can retake the site because the enemies are forced into bad post-plant scenarios. And in this round, we see exactly that happen. The enemy team comes in with a Sage Wall strat for B site on split, and honestly it's a very difficult strat to try and stop the enemies from taking the site with altogether. Now Wardell's teammates here, Killjoy and Sage, they instead just opt to keep the enemies out of the front side of site and wait on their team. Now this is a huge decision because if Killjoy and Sage go for a hero play and they die, even if they trade 2 for 2, the other team can take control of Hell and or Heaven and CT. And make this round so much more difficult because there are so many more angles to actually clear whenever you're retaking the site now. Instead, we see them play passive, and we see Wardell drop down into Hell and play a crossfire with his team. This means that anyone who wants to get into a post-plant position that isn't terrible has to fight through Wardell and both of his teammates. Now this is a textbook round because planning on B-side is good for attackers, but being forced into a funnel and only being able to hide backside, pillar, or garage makes the round almost too difficult to win without a decent man advantage or hitting some insane shots defending the retake. Now the biggest thing to remember about playing for retake is that playing for retake isn't about giving up the site completely. You want to give up the site while keeping control of as many of the crucial angles of the site as possible. This is things like keeping control of screens and Heaven when the enemies are going for A site on split, or maybe giving up long A and fighting for control of short when the enemies are going for A control on Haven. All in all, what you're going for is to allow the enemies to come into the site while giving your team the advantage by keeping control of a valuable angle to hold from. In almost every situation, keeping control of areas to retake from is going to be more important than going for the hero play and trying to hold a site 1v5 or 2v5. Now, this is one thing I see people not do very much at all, and I think we have to talk about it. It's posting on an angle. Now, this is honestly one of the most important things to do when taking a site, because flankers are a huge problem in Valorant when committing multiple people into a site take. Whenever you watch streamers, you'll see them often say, "I'm posted on X spot." Like in this situation here, we see Wardell posted on Rope Room because his team wants to take over B Heaven. Now, this seems like an obvious strat, right? But it's so often that everyone on your team runs past an angle that an enemy could run out of at any second, and we actually see that later in this round. Now that enemy running out could be the turning point of a round because they managed to get a couple of picks whenever you're running into the site and you didn't notice that they were going to come out behind you. Or on the other hand, it could be the nail in the coffin for the other team because you managed to pick off their flanker and you can now focus more attention on taking that site safely. We actually see something really interesting here, where Wardell refocuses onto a more important angle to post on, which is stairs of B Heaven, whenever his entire team runs down onto site and no one posts on it. Wardell quickly turns back to post on it for them, but he returns to Rope Room whenever the Sage slides back up the rope and decides to post on stairs for them. Now the basic theory behind posting on an angle is that it reduces the amount of angles an enemy is able to approach the site from. With Wardell holding mid, Sage holding stairs, the entire rest of the team can focus on getting the bomb down and defending from the CT push, because that's the only possible angle that an enemy can push from. Now, angles popular to post on would be Heaven on A side on Haven when you're approaching from long, Heaven on A side Ascent when coming from main, ramps when going on to A side on split, and many more. But keep in mind, whenever you're going towards a site, you should either be with the stack helping to clear the site and plant, or you should be posting on a high value angle to make sure your team isn't going to be surprised by an unexpected enemy peek. Next, we have strategic map playstyle. By giving up areas of the map that you're just not going to be useful in or just too difficult to hold by themselves. Now, there are a lot of areas that are just too dangerous or too useless to play when you're playing Valorant, and it's best to just leave the area and play somewhere else for the round. Now, a common example of this that most of us probably know now is playing U-Haul Unbind when the enemy team has a Brimstone ult available. But there are a ton more examples that we can take note of, like Rope Room on Split. Now, this is a very controversial room because a raised nade, Sova arrow, raised Roomba, or any smoke makes that position almost impossible to be impactful from, unless the enemies decide to push through their smoke and take the fight, which is usually not the play that we see. Instead, we see the Rope Room player do something like this. Here, Wardell hasn't been smoked off or naded out, so he's been playing Rope Room, but as soon as he gets smoked off here, he runs away so he can go double up in B Heaven where he can be much more impactful from. We see this very often from pro players because if the enemies decide to run into rope room, they're funneling themselves almost into death if Phoenix catches them rotating through. Instead, they can double up in B heaven and stop the enemies from actually doing anything with their mid control that they took. Here we see Wardell get a huge pick on the spike carrier for the enemy team. And this excess pressure on heaven essentially won them the round because where Wardell would be useless sitting behind a smoke in rope room, instead he got the biggest pick of the round in B heaven because he can back up his teammate in another crucial part of the map. Ultimately, the biggest takeaway here is to give up the parts of the map that are seemingly impossible to control and instead go help out your teammates to control another important area of the map, because you want to be able to impact the round in some way and not just cross your fingers hoping that they walk through the smoke into you so you can take a 50-50 fight. And finally, we have a strategy that's very underused, and those that I see using it very rarely get it right, and that's having a lurker. Now in this round we see Sage being the lurker for TSM and picking up a critical round for TSM on attacker's side split. Now realistically you're usually not going to want the Sage to be the lurker in this position, but TSM does get the pick on Phoenix and they just decide to run it as fast as possible. Here most lurkers would either run to pressure somewhere because their team is planting the bomb, or they would run as quick as they could towards the bomb site to help their team and get on to be a line of contact. But as the lurker, you have to have patience and play around what the enemies know. And without seeing Sage for the entire round, Hazed has the biggest advantage in the game, being unpredictable. Hazed rotates over quickly and plays just outside of the vision of the enemies and plays to support his jet. Now since he gets smoked off here, he really can't do much, so he simply waits on the enemies to overcommit to killing the jet and then pushing onto the site. And he manages to come out at the perfect opportunity when they're going to take the site and secure the round, and he manages to get 2 huge kills and a res to secure the round for his team. Now this was all because he's playing to be unpredictable. Now when you're playing against good people, they're consistently making a mental note of who they see and where they see them, so they can make assumptions for where they're going to be. When a lurker manages to slip through the cracks and not be seen for the entire round, we come up with great plays like this one. Now, this isn't to say that whenever you're lurking, you should be playing for yourself and never running to help your team. Instead, you just have to make sure that you're there fast enough to take shots after they make contact with your team. Now, as the lurker, you shouldn't be the first line of contact for your team, and you also shouldn't be baiting and playing for yourself. As the lurker, you have to be unpredictable and pop out when the enemies are focused on something else, and this calculated chaos can turn the tide of rounds that seem almost impossible to win. Now, all in all, we have a ton that we can learn from these pro players, and just instilling some of these habits and strategies that they've developed over about 10,000 hours of Counter-Strike can help elevate our game if we manage to implement them correctly. But make sure to let us know in the comments which of the tips you think is the most important, and let us know what you want to see from us next. And make sure you hit that subscribe button with bells on so you can stay up to date and stay ahead of the pack. Now, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you for spending this little bit of your day with us, and thank you for watching. I'm Notorious Dub, signing off.